Yeah, give us a bit of a rundown, Steve. What is going on in the commercial property world nowadays?
All right, so similar to residential, there's obviously a weird sentiment in the market where sellers are trying to sell 6 months prices ago, buyers are trying to buy in 6 months' time. So we have seen a little bit of softening because there are less kind of buyers, but there are less sellers as well. So that's what's keeping kind of prices strong. So in general, there's been about a 0.2% cap rate reduction. So a little bit of a price drop. You're just negotiating slightly better deals. However, like there's more to it than that. Like I remember I was watching last week where PK was talking about how commercial has to go down as interest rates go up. And the premise of that is correct. Like most, you value commercial based on like the return that you get. However, if that was the case, how come in the last 3 years, as we've had rising interest rates, cap rates have come down, the prices have tightened? So it's not, there's more to it than that. There's obviously a supply and demand and things like that. However, with that argument, the higher interest rates go, the more resi investors switch to commercial, because where they've got a neutral or negatively geared residential going really negative, you've got a positively geared commercial going slightly positive. So which one is then considered kind of lower risk? However, I also think like, and especially coming into next year, so many more investors are switched on with commercial now. It's no longer just a high net worth game. Like I've just personally sold like 5,000 books. So that 5 years ago, if I mentioned to someone commercial, they were just kind of like, no, too risky kind of thing. So I think we're going to have a huge influx, which will keep kind of prices high. There will be a softening, obviously, depending on what interest rates do. But at the moment, there's some good buying. But as I always tell clients, just buy when you're ready. Like as soon as you're ready and you're comfortable and you're educated, that's the right time to buy. Like how many people do you know at the start of COVID said Sydney and Melbourne was going to grow by 30%? Like no one. So no one's got a crystal ball. Buy when you're ready and buy in the market that you're in. Buy well in the market you're in, and long term you'll be right. So have that 10-year mindset and you'll be okay.
Yeah, it's 100% the right way to think about it as well. I see this all the time. I've got people that I'm working with, and they're like, yeah, should I buy now or wait for this crazy crash that is this impending doom that is happening? And that's what they were saying 6 months ago. And that's what they'll say in the next 6 months and the next 6 months. And then they'll be ready to buy. But then something will happen. You'll lose your job. You'll have to go on maternity leave. And all of a sudden it changes your borrowing ability of what you could borrow. So as interest rates do rise, it does make borrowing capacity. It does make your borrowing. It used to be, you could borrow, if you could borrow $500,000 6 months ago, you now no longer can borrow 500,000. It's probably more like 430, 450 around there. So, if you can get into the market with something and you're ready to rock and roll with it, you're good to go.
Yeah, you get a lot of buyers like, oh, I'm going to sit on my cash for 6 months. But I can tell you, like I do sales calls all day, every day. Everyone is thinking that. So thinking that you're going to jump in 20 minutes before them is pretty damn slim. And then the other point is the market's not a bouncy ball. It doesn't drop to the bottom and then bounce straight back up. You could be buying in a year's time and it be, 10% discounted. It could stay at that price for 5 years. So what have you actually achieved? You've saved a little bit. You've just saved yourself that 10% growth in 5 years' time. So yeah, for me, like just buy when you're ready. I've literally chatted to thousands of investors now. Not one has been able to pick the market consistently. Not one. So if the experts aren't doing it, don't think you're going to outsmart them.
GapMaps work with a lot of different property developers of different sizes, but we also work with a lot of commercial groups like fast food and childcare and the like. And I don't need to tell the people on this call that a lot of the decisions that are made with property have to do with location. So the more data and the better, more accurate data you have access to, the better you can do your job, the better investment you can consider, right? Things like demographics. Is the area growing? What does the competition look like if you're looking at commercial? Like, what are the amenities? What are the schools? What are the hospitals? Things like that. Are there any pending developments in the area? So having access to this type of data is really important to help you with your decision-making process. A lot of people who don't have access to GapMaps rely on Google, which is not usually your best friend because you might have to go to quite a few different websites to access a lot of this information. Sometimes the websites don't cover all the information you need, and then you've got to bring it all together, right? So that's where GapMaps kind of comes into play. So what is GapMaps? I'm not going to kind of go through this whole slide, but essentially what GapMaps is, it's a mapping solution that brings together a lot of different sources of data together quickly and efficiently to help you make decisions. So what type of data? Things like demographics, points of interest. We've built some supply and demand metrics for certain industries. We also have development approval data. We have some traffic data and things like that to help throughout that process. In terms of the type of demographics, things like population projections, your standard demographics, age, income, number of households, the type of workers that live in the area. A lot of that we pre-build into the system so you don't have to go looking for it. And from a commercial perspective, we work across a lot of different sectors, things like childcare, aged care, fuel, auto tires and servicing and the like. Because at the end of the day, we're providing data and a lot of different businesses can use the same data to make decisions. It just depends on what they're looking for in that respect.
A single person, 20 years old, looking for a max purchase price of 450,000, and they're looking for both.
We'll apply the filter 450. Yep. So as we apply the filter, so as you can see in real time, it narrows down the list of suburbs right away, right?
Yep. And then they're looking for both growth and cash flow as well.
Right.
Well, guys, when I'm using this, if I was like looking for a 450K property, on this, I might set the median price potentially at 500,000 as well, because sometimes I'll buy below the median house price.
Yep, true. So we'll adjust that to 500. So with a growth of, let's say, 5%, and then the average annual growth over the past 10 years, let's say, between 3 to 7%. Now you're down to 186 list of suburbs, right? So the other thing that we can apply is
well, one thing is I want tenants, so I want to make sure the vacancy rate is quite low.
Yeah, so we can adjust the vacancy rate 3% and below. Right.
I love how fast this is as well. Like, it's just like you get people that sit on realestate.com and they're like, oh, I know this area now. No, you don't. Like the amount of data points you can get here and then hone in on what have we got now? 173 suburbs. How quickly is just ridiculous.
And then let's say we want a good percentage of owner occupier as well. Let's say we put in around 60% owner occupier. Now you're down to 54, and let's say the population is at least 10,000 on a suburb level. Right? So if you put 10,000, you only have 3.
Okay.
For the percentage of owner occupier, imagine if you're looking for a high percentage, you wouldn't leave it as 0 to 60. You'd do like 60 to 100, for instance. Is that how it works?
Let's say 60 to 100. Yep. So you're down to 46 now with a minimum of 5% population on a suburb level, right? So let's say so you've already selected that, and it's given you, in a matter of seconds or minutes, you're down to 46 from 15,000. So what you want to do now is, let's say here, and then the budget here is, and then you can sort the data from highest to lowest as well. So now you sort it out, and you can see here the yield, the growth, the vacancy rate, And what we can do is we can compare those 5 different areas against each other to see how the numbers stacks up, right? And how did they perform historically. So all we have to do now is just select those 5, any of the 5, right? And then click compare.
Yeah, and this is the crazy thing, because this is what we do as property investors, right? You have to overlay your circumstances, and I think that's why it's so powerful to say, hey, what is your budget, and what kind of returns are you actually looking for? Like if you're looking for super duper cash flow, then maybe these areas are not going to be able to do it, like this one.
Yeah, this is what we have to do as buyers agents. You always get people that go, oh no, you got to buy blue chip or you got to buy cash flow. It depends what the buyer is. Like what your client's looking for is completely different from one person to the next. Like, yes, buy blue chip, but if you've got a 450K budget, that doesn't help you.
Yeah, true. And different people has their own requirements, right? So that's the reason why I created a platform to cater to different requirements and needs and different goals. right? So here we selected those 5 different properties, and we click compare now.
They all have a 5%. They all have a 5% yield. Their annual growth rate is 3.95.
So the vacancy rate is low. Days on market.
Low.
So this is the November 2022 data, because every month the data, new data comes in, usually every first or second week of the month.
Yeah.
So if you notice this one's pretty unique. This is for co-living or rooming house. So median number of people looking for a room to rent, and the number of rooms advertised online, and the median rent for a room.
Yeah.
I've actually bought a few duplexes in Bushland Beach as well, so this worked out quite nicely.
So, and we also have the population forecast on the LGA level, or the local council level, where these suburbs belong. So
that's awesome.
As an investor, you shouldn't only look at the current month's data. You should also look at how did they perform historically. So now in here, you are comparing those 5 areas that you selected against each other, right? So you can compare them by here, median price, and then you can compare them by rent. Seems like all of these 5 areas that we selected has been increasing in rent, right? And then the yield and the vacancy rate. So it's pretty consistent over the past 3 years. The vacancy rate has been below 3%, which is good.
Interesting to see the WA suburb is tracking along nicely with this random suburb in Queensland as well. Is that?
Well, that's the thing about this, because you won't even know that there are areas, that are performing like this without having a tool.
We have no idea.
Like I said, Joe, on the last one with John, is visuals are the most important thing. Like I could put all this data in a big spreadsheet for you over the last 10 years, and you'll just glaze over. You won't look. But looking at this, like you said, you drew conclusions straight away just by seeing a nice graph.
Yeah. So you have days on market, sale listings. It's been going down as well. Rent, online listing market demand. People, they're looking at the buy section with the intention to buy. Number of people looking for a room. Seems like Annandale in Queensland, there's a lot of people looking to rent a room. So there's an opportunity to do rooming house there. If you buy by the council.
What did you say, Steve?
That's a bit of an outlier for the conditions that we've put in.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's a lot of flooding in Annandale, so just be careful.
And then rooms advertised online, development approvals on the council level where these suburbs belong, right? And then the population forecast as well for those LGA. So for this one, development approvals for houses, this is on the council level. So we can also see on the suburb level what are the development applications being submitted. So in here, so there are 3 icons here. So you can either click that or down here, right? Click that. So we'll click here in Annandale. So we'll click Annandale. So this will show us all, also in the map, all the development applications that was submitted. So the DA reference number, the description of the DA, and the address, and when was it received by the council.
Crazy. Yeah, and that's super handy. Is if you're looking to understand what the development potential is in an area, it's really super useful just to look at what's been approved previously. And not saying that that's what can get approved. Obviously, you need to speak to a town planner and understand what can happen. But it gives you a bit of confidence in knowing, oh, this is a 1:3 site, or this is a 1:2 site, because this property right here is zoned exactly the same. It has the exact same parameters, square meterage wise. I can now confidently, go out there and assume that this can go ahead and do a development. But obviously, you have to then take that next step.
Exactly.
is from the one and only Jeff Miles. Would be keen to know if there's any analysis on the platform and which metrics are more meaningful to predict capital growth.
Right. It's each individual has their own preference metrics that they use, right? So that's the reason why I made it, do whatever you like, or use whatever metric would weigh more or would have more weight for you, right? And aside also on your risk assessment as well. But for me, I've looked at the number of stocks that are coming in. That would be the number of development approvals, and at the same time on the supply, and combine that. It's not here, but I just use maps or near maps or any maps out there to see how big is the developable land available within that area.
Yeah. How much is available to come to the
and lastly the 10-year average historical growth. Although it's not a guarantee that it will form the same, but at least we have an idea how it performed historically. Let's say it performed 8%. I would say I to be conservative, I'll just use 5% of that on my feasibility.
This is exactly, Gilbert, why you need software like this to be able to predict the next 10 years. Because, like you said, 10 years previous capital growth doesn't mean future capital growth, because
exactly
it's had that growth because it's had the demand. Maybe it's at the top now. So the next 5-10 years is actually the slow spot, and you want to pick that up and coming area. So there's huge amounts of kind of theories in that. What are your ones, Joe? What are your big kind of key metrics that you'll look at? Like holistic view, helicopter view, what are the main ones you look at?
Well, yeah, kind of what Gilbert is talking about. What is the supply? This is why I was so interested with GapMaps about what is coming to the market and what the population forecast. And the problem with forecast is it is just a kind of a guesstimation, but it's a guesstimation around where the council is going to put hundreds of thousands of people. So for me, it's the supply of where are humans going, and what is the demand of where humans are going, and the supply of what is the available stock on there. So you can then see how many houses are going to be built in this area. Well, there's no more land available, so they're going to have to start doing those higher densities. And then in that, you'll start to see zones. So in South Australia, for instance, they have general neighborhood, which is just the normal everyday housing. And then they've got something called HDN, which is housing diversity neighborhood. And that allows you to put 3 properties on a site. So I'm starting to weave my way into the areas where council is saying, yep, we want to put those people here. So yeah, for me, it's literally supply and demand. Where are the people going, and where's the supply coming from on there? From a commercial perspective, how does it kind of work for you looking at that? Like, do you use a lot of the same residential data, and what does it look like, and what are the differences?
It is. So this is hard with commercial, and they normally happen at different times, because you can't have new housing developments and growing population without having the commercial there already. Because guess what you need to build houses? You need warehouses. Then guess what you need to service that population that's going there? You need retail. So you need the hairdressers and medical centers and dentists and that. And then it's a chicken or egg kind of scenario. So they normally have to put in the commercial, and then the kind of housing will come from after that. So a lot of areas I buy, I know, like I'm buying their residential. So like, I'll tell you. So Townsville, I actually think there's some good opportunities for residential, but because they've oversupplied the commercial market, like a vacancy rate on an industrial property is like 1 to 3 years, but the vacancy rate on a residential property is like 0.2 to 0.6%. So 2 completely different facets. I'm using the residential data to make my decision positive or negative for the commercial data. And then, like you said, it's supply and demand. Same thing for commercial, but you marry that up with the residential data as well.
If they don't have time and data combined with local knowledge, that's where you guys come in, right? That's your expertise. Plus, the relationship with agents and all.
Yeah, definitely. Like this only gets you to identify where those hot spots are from a data perspective. But there was a location that I was looking at in Victoria. I did all the data and I was like, this place is amazing. Now I'm going to go to the location. I went there and I didn't see what the data was telling me. And I said, no, I've got to, unfortunately, spend all these hours researching it, but I know like I can't see this happening. So it can help you. You do need to go to that next level though and fly to that property, fly to that location.
And the reality is there's no perfect data, right? In reality is that no matter how much effort we exert to make it close to perfect, it's not going to be perfect, and it's always going to lag.
That's a great point as well.
I get that similarly for like commercial, Joe. So like we might look at say like a retail strip, and all the properties might be tenanted, and they've all been tenanted 5 years. On paper, that looks fantastic. You're like, oh, this is brilliant. They're all tenanted. They're none vacant. You actually go there. Some retail centers you go to, like the little suburban retail strips, and they're a bit of a ghost town. There's just no one there. There's like those owners just sitting there on their phone, faffing about. And then other ones you go to and they're absolutely buzzing. The cafes overflowing, things like that. Which one are you more likely to get rental increases on? The buzzing one. So the data only takes you so far, but at least gets you to the point where it's worth inspecting the property.
Yep. Or you can use the data to validate, whatever somewhat like a professional or a BA is telling you, right?
No, Gilbert, BAs don't lie to anyone. Don't do it.
No, I mean just to validate, at least education is still important. Right?
The biggest thing I took away from today is just how many data metrics there are and how little people know about it. Like you can extrapolate as much as you want. It's not as simple as buy and make money. Like there is so many metrics and then so many strategies to take off with that metrics as well. Like I've got a completely different opinion to you, Gilbert. Like I actually don't care what the last 10 years of property growth has been, because for me, that doesn't help me at all. I've missed that. I got to focus on the next 10 years. So, and it's just how you use that data, but you need that data to begin with.